Shooting resumes, tyres are banned and a personnel carrier is set on fire in the eastern Ukrainian city of Mariupol after at least 20 were killed during a military assault on Friday.
We condemn the outbreak of violence caused by pro-Russia separatists.
The US blames anti-government forces in Mariupol despite footage showing the Ukrainian army opening fire on unarmed civilians. In the Baltic region, NATO kicks off massive military drills on Russia's doorstep involving a record-breaking 6,000 troops. And Afghans displaced by more than a decade of conflict struggle to get their lives back to normal. Our team meets families who say they now feel like outsiders in their own country. Hello and welcome to RT International 24-hour news live from Moscow. I am Yulia Shapovalova. Thanks for joining us. There are reports of renewed gunfire in the center of Mariupol in eastern Ukraine. The town of just under 500,000 people is already in mourning following an attack by government troops as locals celebrated Victory Day on Friday. Let's now get more from RT's Irina Galushko, who's following the situation in the region. Let's now listen in.
There have been reports of gunfire and explosions heard throughout the city. For a lot of people in Mariupol, however, the tragic events of May 9th have marked the point of no return. As they say, there's absolutely no going back to the events, to life as it was before the deadly attack.
Talks or a truce with the current authorities are out of the question. After Odessa, after Mariupol, after Slavyansk, after all the things these nationalists who claim to be Democrats while wearing Nazi symbols have done, truce is impossible now.
This is how the people in Mariupol feel right now. Basically, for them, there is no turning back. There is no going back to real life again. There has been an APC that was set on fire earlier in the day. It took several hours for the fire to go out. And of course, people are still expecting that it isn't just over yet. They're thinking that the National Guard that has retreated from the city might come back. And of course, what happened in Mariupol has struck at the heart of people, not just in the southeast, but also throughout, you can say, the entire country. Here in Odessa, actually, people have been brought out onto the square behind me. And this, of course, is the scene of another tragedy that has occurred just a week ago when 46 people died in a fire in the building where people were trying to take cover, again, from pro-Ukrainian nationalists as well as the right sector. And here on the street, again, you can hear people talking about Mariupol and talking about Odessa, and the very same feeling that there is no turning back now could be heard and felt.
Ukrainian officials say 20 members of the local self-defense force and 2 servicemen were killed in Mariupol on Friday in what it has labeled an anti-terror operation. However, footage from the scene shows civilians coming under fire, and you may find some of these pictures disturbing. Apparently, civilians were shot at by Ukrainian troops. As one man falls to the ground, people shout that they have no weapons. The man manages to sit up as soldiers leave the scene. And that same footage from another angle shows troops firing in the direction of people on the street. To stop armoured vehicles entering the city, locals built barricades, and there were also crowds rallying to mark Victory Day. When demonstrators learned Ukrainian troops were trying to storm the local police headquarters, they rushed to prevent it. Graham Phillips is in Mariupol right now, following renewed shooting, and here's a quick taste of his report we have in full on RT.com for you.
Mariupol, there's explosions going off behind me, there's a military vehicle burning, and the city is in a state of complete chaos. We've got the administrative building next to me that's been sprayed, destroyed. We've got explosions filling the air. We've got an atmosphere of absolute panic here.
And you can also follow Grant Phillips on Twitter for all his latest updates, pictures and videos from the scene. And there's footage showing the local administration building in Mariupol in ruins after it was reportedly set on fire in the wake of Friday's bloodshed. One journalist working for RT Rapli video agency was caught up in the violence in Mariupol. The 23-year-old was shot in the stomach and badly injured despite wearing a bulletproof vest. He's now in hospital in a critical but stable condition. And we caught up with a man who saw the incident firsthand. He asked us to hide his identity for safety reasons.
Your correspondent was showing the armed people en masse that he was unarmed, trying to convince them that he was a journalist, that he was a member of the press. Then he suddenly decided to run across the street where we're on. A shot was heard and he fell down.
There has been reaction to the violence in Mariupol from Ukraine's interim president. He said the military operation would have been more successful if it weren't for the tens of thousands of civilians opposing the government forces. He claimed Kiev is open to dialogue and blamed anti-government protesters for the bloodshed. A view shared by Washington, as RT's Gainet Chichikan reports.
We know that Washington has Kiev's back. But when Kiev forces used heavy weaponry and tanks in Mariupol to storm a regional police headquarters where officers had refused to take orders from Kiev, and when the forces then shot at civilians who flocked to support the officers trapped in the building, when it's all shot on camera for the world to see, you would expect a little less biased reaction from the U.S. State Department. But here's what we have.
We condemn the outbreak of violence caused by pro-Russia separatists this morning in Mariupol, which has resulted in multiple deaths.
It seems no matter how many people get killed as a result of what Kiev calls an anti-terrorist operation in the east of Ukraine, we won't hear a word of condemnation from Washington. Instead, whatever happens, the U.S. blames what Kiev calls Russian separatists. Many of them want to be part of Ukraine, but on their own terms. But the U.S. has already painted a black and white picture of good versus evil in Ukraine, and there seems to be no room for other colors. One could only imagine what the reaction here in Washington would have been had it been the ousted president, Viktor Yanukovych, unleashing tanks against civilians. But now roles are reversed and we see a very different approach.
People in the eastern regions of Ukraine have defied the interim government in Kiev since it took power in February. Many of those dubbed separatists actually just want the introduction of a federal system. That means each region would be able to elect its own government. Also, people want the region to control their own finances. The east makes up the lion's share of Ukraine's economy, but all the money goes to Kiev. That's why people want to pay taxes locally. Plus, over 80% of those in the east of Ukraine speak Russian, and they want the language recognized formally. But with the people there now facing a military assault, former UK intelligence officer Charles Shoebridge thinks Western government will be ultimately left red-faced over their support for the crackdown.
When this kind of assault is mounted, particularly by troops who only have, shall we say, heavy weapons and live ammunition, they don't have, seem to have riot control equipment, plastic bullets and so on, then civilian casualties and deaths are almost inevitable. And that would have been known by the Kiev authorities. Although there's been no, of course, as one would expect, there's been no comment of condemnation about what's going on in Mariupol and elsewhere from the US and EU governments. Nonetheless, at some stage, this is going to become quite embarrassing for the governments that are, shall we say, supporting this kind of armed action against what undeniably is largely consisting of ordinary people trying to push back against tanks.
And you can also find all the latest from Mariupol and other Ukrainian cities online at RT.com. We've got minute-by-minute updates on the crisis, so just log on. And coming up on RT International, life after war in Afghanistan.
More than 100,000 Afghans have been displaced by the war in the last year alone, forced to flee violence, a growing Taliban insurgency, and economic uncertainty. Many have found refuge in camps like this one. The war may be coming to an end for international forces, but there are too many Afghans still left wondering when they'll be able to return home.
Plus, we'll report on spring storm in the Baltic. NATO's biggest ever training exercise held right on Russia's doorstep amid the turmoil in Ukraine. All that after the break.
business news, reviews, economic ups and downs from the finance hub of Moscow to London, New York, Shanghai and the rest of the globe. Join me, Katie Pilbeam, every week on RT.
My name's Daniel Bushell.
Tom Urban in Washington, D.C. Banking news policies.
Considered I'm Peter Lavelle. A pleasure to have you with us here on RT today. I'm Rory Susham.
You're watching RT International. It's good to have you with us. Despite tensions between the West and Russia running high over events in Ukraine, NATO has pushed ahead with its annual military drills in the Baltic region. This year's drills in Estonia, right on Russia's border, are the biggest since 2003. The maneuvers, dubbed Spring Storm, involve a record-breaking 6,000 personnel, a French cybersecurity team, fighter jets, a missile defense system from Poland, and a Belgian anti-aircraft unit are all involved. And if you look here, this is a clearer picture of the NATO military buildup in the Eastern Europe since Ukraine was plunged into violence. So dozens of fighter jets and several spy planes have been deployed to secure the bloc's dominance of the region's airspace. And the target of the show of force is no secret, says international affairs commentator Rick Rozoff.
U.S. troops are stationed in most every former Warsaw Pact country outside of the Soviet Union itself. Next year, the U.S. and NATO, this is a joint enterprise, joint endeavor, are going to place 24 intermediate range Standard Missile 3 interceptor missiles in Romania, right across the Black Sea from Russia, with the prospect 3 years later of deploying a similar amount, 24 to be exact, Standard Missile 3s of a more advanced variety in Poland. So what we're talking about is both a very real military presence that poses a threat to non-NATO members in the neighborhood, and those are in the first instance, of course, Belarus and Russia, but also it's a symbolic gesture to place U.S. military forces in countries bordering Ukraine right now and bordering Russia, because what it suggests is that the U.S. is making a military commitment to defend its NATO allies by making even a nominal deployment of military contingents to those countries.
And online for you, Barack Obama again pledges to close Guantanamo Bay prison. But some U.S. congressmen are already seeking almost $70 million to build another secret detention camp in the Caribbean. We've got the full story on our website. And also there, die waiting, American lawmakers launched an investigation into the deaths of dozens of veterans amid claims hospitals manipulated appointment lists to choose who was treated. For more, log on to RT.com.
Right from the scene. First-rate news and eye-gripping pictures. On our reporters' Twitter and Instagram. To be in the know, follow us online.
With the majority of U.S. troops in Afghanistan packed up and ready to go home, Afghans who will be left with a war-torn country fear for the future. Fleeing war to find misery has been the plight of thousands of Afghan families displaced from their homes in search of security. RT's Lucy Kafanov reports now about some of those who now feel like strangers in their own country.
The sound of Afghanistan for hundreds of years. Outlawed during the Taliban's cruel regime, drowned out by war in recent decades. It's a folk song from the southern Helmand province, but you won't hear it in the village where these musicians are from. They were forced to flee last month.
The Taliban control our village now. They use our houses as military bases, and the government has no power in our area. So what choice did we have? Either die or leave.
On the outskirts of Kabul, these narrow lanes and crumbling mud structures are home to hundreds of Afghans displaced by war. Most are from the Sangin district in Helmand, which remains one of the most dangerous places in all of Afghanistan. Ahmed arrived 5 years ago. He doesn't expect to return.
The war isn't over. If we go back, we will be killed. It's an internal war now, and I don't see it ending in the near future.
His youngest ones were born here. 2 daughters died in an attack back home. This tattered photocopy of their bodies is all that remains.
She was 4 years old. She was 2.
Aisha Bibi lived through Afghanistan's many horrors: the Soviet invasion, civil war, and the Taliban. 3 years ago, an airstrike killed most of her family. 3 generations under one roof, now gone.
On the ground there were Taliban, and in the skies were planes with bombs. We lost everything. To me, there's no difference anymore between the Americans, the government, or the Taliban. They all fight, and we suffer.
They suffer here too. The camp has no electricity, sewage, or running water. Most arrive with few belongings, but jobs are scarce, and so they remain destitute. Each winter, freezing temperatures bring deaths. There's no money for firewood, so this mother burns plastic bags. No money for a meal either. It'll be tea for dinner. Whatever aid that's handed out, they use or sell. It's never enough. Sleep offers little respite from the struggles of life. They're safe from bombs here, but not from painful memories like the loss of 2 sons.
It's impossible to forget such horrors. I relive them every night. In my dream, I'm running away from the bombs, but my babies are still inside the house. When I come back, I find their bodies. I can't sleep because of it. None of us can sleep well at night.
A growing number of areas outside of Kabul are becoming dangerous, and aid groups say they're preparing for things to get worse.
The international military forces are leaving the country, so they are withdrawing. So they need a reason, and they need also a rationale to explain to their population why now they can leave. The truth is that there is no such success story at all. What we see is that the war will continue for the Afghan population in the following months and years.
More than 100,000 Afghans were displaced in the last year alone, forced to flee violence, a growing Taliban insurgency, and economic uncertainty. Some of them have found refuge in camps like this one. The war may be coming to an end for most international forces, but there are too many Afghans left wondering whether they'll be able to return home.
For now, this is where most will remain. This melody may be an elegy to better times, but it's also a testament to an unbroken spirit. They've lost everything, but not their hope. Displaced, but still determined to survive. Lucy Kafanov, RT, Kabul.
Catch more of Lucy's first-hand reports from Afghanistan in the coming days right here on RT International.
Malnutrition, violence, drug addiction, poverty, insecurity, corruption. What are the values here? Lucy Kafanov reports on Afghan realities.
This is an incredibly dangerous...
Some other headlines from around the world now. Violence erupted in Bosnia and Herzegovina's capital as protesters bent on overthrowing the government rallied outside the federal parliament building. The demonstration in Sarajevo ended in so-called March of Liberty that started 3 days ago in the city of Tuzla and attracted people from across the country. People in Bosnia and Herzegovina are angry about high unemployment rates since several factories were closed in the industrial city of Tuzla in February. And to demonstrations to Rio de Janeiro now, where much of over 300 security workers made congestion in the city centre even worse. Protests over the Football World Cup are picking up across Brazil, with workers demanding more money to work in often hazardous conditions to get the facilities ready. The demos often end in clashes and police firing tear gas and water cannons. A bombing in eastern suburbs of the Syrian city of Hama has reportedly killed 17 Syrian government soldiers. That's after hundreds of rebels surrendered their stronghold in Homs, which is just 50 kilometers away, in exchange for safe passage to the nearby northern countryside. The city was held by rebels for more than 3 years before being retaken by forces loyal to President Assad. The drawn-out conflict has left much of Homs devastated. And back to the Ukrainian crisis now, and there are concerns the looming threat of wide-ranging Western sanctions against Russia may seriously push up the global cost of oil. Fuel experts warn that the United Kingdom, which takes in a lot of Russian supplies, could be among those hit hard. RT's Polly Boyko has the details.
There will have to be other consequences and other costs.
And if you've got a car in the UK, he's talking to you. The country's main motoring organisations are warning that the situation in Ukraine is going to push up the price of petrol.
Fuel traders have already begun to buy up stocks to guard against being caught out in the event of the situation worsening, which automatically causes prices to increase due to a tightening in supply.
A large proportion of our diesel and heavy oil product for conversion into diesel is coming from Russia. So that is the reason why there is a certain amount of concern in the marketplace. So they look as though they have priced in a certain amount of geopolitical tension in Ukraine and between the Russian and the West.
The predicted price hike is around 5p per litre. That's an extra £4 for a full tank. And motorists in Britain already pay 60% tax on fuel, making driving here more expensive than in any other major economy.
It's so annoying that all the prices are going up and up and up.
Well, because it's affecting what I purchase, isn't it? And it's completely beyond my control. What can you do about it? Nothing at all, can you?
It shouldn't affect us at all. No, it's over there, so why should it affect us?
The oil companies tend to use any excuse they can to react very quickly to put prices up.
Now, I've just filled up half a tank, and the cost, as you can see here, is 33.53. Now, with a 5p increase that's being predicted, that cost will go up to £35, and that's just for half a tank of petrol. The thing is, though, campaigners for lower petrol prices say in the case of Ukraine, there's little risk of an actual oil shortage. So who or what is moving the pump prices?
As soon as any disturbance happens there, watch the speculators. Panic, doom and gloom. It's always happening like that. We mustn't panic, and that's one of the problems we've got to actually address, and the government should be listening to this. They should be lowering tax, and they should also be putting some sort of control over actually oil speculation.
And if the cost of a barrel of oil goes up,
any increase would come through to the pumps pretty much straight away. Any increase in the wholesale price, they will have to pass on virtually immediately to their consumers.
And the effects go beyond the petrol station forecourt.
It would increase inflation because everything would be reflected in prices passed on because of the high cost of fuel to the products that we buy in the shops. Jobs will be lost. Small businesses, especially medium-sized to small haulage companies, their costs will go up astronomically, and that would actually impact on people being sacked.
They're the real consequences and costs. Polly Boyko, RT, London.
Up next, Aaron Aid investigates the booms and busts of the financial world. Stay with us for that.